Manchester City Football Club's physio, Sam Blanchard, set himself a massive challenge last summer. He gave himself 1 year to get fit to complete a triathlon on and literally around his home, the Isle of Wight. Now, lockdown has seen a bit of a setback, but his focus has remained strong for the Isle of Wight challenge in a bid to raise awareness for his father's life-limiting condition.
Hello.
Oh, I love it when this works. It's the best start. I don't have to be like, can you hear me? I can't hear you. It's perfect.
Your camera's not on, all that sort of stuff.
I know, exactly. Or it's like, can you the other way a bit? I think it was, a year ago, you decided to set yourself a big challenge.
There's a saying by someone I look up to massively called Ross Edgley, who swam around the UK. There's a saying of his that's be naive enough to start something and stubborn enough to finish it. So I naively thought that I could try and swim around the Isle of Wight, which is 96 kilometres, a feat that's only been done by 5 people in the past. Then go on to cycle around it, which is around 93 kilometres, and then run across it, which would be a marathon, so 42 kilometres. And I thought I'd try and do this across 3 days. And I set this out last summer, not being an athlete of any type. So not being a swimmer, not being a runner, not being a cyclist. So I started talking to people that were sort of in the endurance game, that had sort of, coached people and competed themselves. And I got strength and conditioning sort of advice. I got nutritional advice. I got mental advice. Sort of set out round about August last year, and have been going ever since, really. So my profession is a physiotherapist, so I'm quite lucky with a job that sort of takes me around the world, really.
So who do you work for now?
I work for Manchester City, so I've got a role with the academy up here in Manchester. I've sort of spent, I'd say, about 12 years of my career really working in sport with highly motivated athletes and things like that, but I've always had time to sit on the touchline and watch them do the hard work. The main thing I want to sort of get across is that I'm not an athlete at all. I'd very much spend my time sat in the comfort zone. I enjoy going to the gym, but I'd stick some music on and have long rest periods, and if things weren't quite going my way or anything like that, I'll just go home. I've done my 20 minutes, that'll do. So that's sort of my experience of sport. I've never competed in anything. I've never really entered a race or a competition or won a medal in anything. My dad, on the other hand, is quite the opposite. He's highly competitive, and I sort of grew up with watching him do sort of, so he was a big cyclist, a road cyclist, especially on the Isle of Wight, where he was chairman of one of the cycling teams down there. So I sort of grew up watching him do road races and time trials, and then he moved into the gym and sort of competed a bit more in weightlifting. And then, at one point even turned his hand to swimming, and with my uncle and my cousin. And so I sort of grew up really with that. And about three years ago, we got a diagnosis from my dad that was maybe a few years later than what we wanted it to be. Like we'd known that my dad wasn't well for about 5 or 6 years. And 3 years ago, we finally got a diagnosis that sort of knocked us all, really, because none of us knew what it was. It was a neurological condition called progressive supranuclear palsy, which is, unfortunately, it's a life-limiting condition that affects the brain and affects the neural system, really, a build-up of a certain protein on the brain that affects everything, really. So it affects his personality, his function, and as we said, it's life-limiting. They put a lifespan of about 6 to 7 years on people with this condition. And like I said, when he got diagnosed, the specialist said, we think he's had this for a number of years. So we're sort of at that, unfortunately, at the end of that prediction of the time frame, really. So I wanted to do something about a condition that has no management, has no treatment. It's just about making the person as comfortable as possible. And there's no real understanding on it. Like there's a couple of specialists in the country, but you know, for the most time, we're teaching the nurses or the physios or the doctors that are working with my dad, and we're teaching them about the condition, saying this is how he's presenting and this is what we're noticing. So I wanted to do something that really stood out and really made people sort of stop and say, sorry, what are you doing? And to get people talking, really. So there's a fundraising side of what I'm doing, but there's also an awareness side of it. I thought about, like, you know, doing a marathon or something along those lines, and I thought, no, I need to do something that represents my dad and represents what he stood for, and the competitive nature, and even throughout this condition of him not really knowing that he was beaten. And so I thought, right, I've got to do something that would make him proud, that would represent him, but also I wanted to do something that tied us back to home on the Isle of Wight.
And the training will have obviously been a little bit stilted because of this lockdown situation. So I've been talking to a lot of people about how they're keeping up with their training in lockdown. So, you know, over the last 8 months, we were getting into a rhythm, and as you say, then learning to push yourself, finding your new limits, and then thinking there's probably some more limits I can get to. But, you know, it's difficult when you're on a roll with it, and then suddenly we've had this cap put on what we can actually do. So how have you been coping with that?
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of the momentum that I'd gathered, and sort of before the COVID situation, I'd set myself landmarks and milestones of, if I can get to here, then I'm in a more realistic chance of achieving this challenge. And one of my coaches, Mike, from the very beginning, sort of said to me about you know, that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and to stop thinking about the whole elephant, to stop thinking about the challenge, but start setting yourself smaller goals. And you know, it started off with, my first swim was 1.5 kilometers, which, you know, now I look back at, and you know, it'd be quite you know, quite a smaller swim, but at the time it was like, oh, I've never done that before. And so every time I was doing something, it was the first time I was doing it. And I built up to the point where I was doing sort of sometimes 3 sessions a day, where, you know, I'd do like a 4-hour swim, and then the next day and get up and do a gym session, a bike and a run, and then go again for another swim the following day. And was basically eat, sleep, train, repeat, in terms of the schedule that I was in. And it was becoming easy. It was becoming, in terms of preparing myself for that, it was, think about the next step, think about where I've got to get to, remind yourself why you're doing it. And the whole time I was just thinking about, you know, my dad and the condition, and drawing on that motivation and the emotive side from that. And then all of a sudden this situation sort of happened to everybody, and I don't think anyone really saw it. And for me, the milestone that I had was a training camp in Mallorca at the sort of end of March, where it was going to be my first sort of intro to open water swimming, with one of the successful swimmers that went around the Isle of Wight, a woman called Anna Wardley, who was a hugely inspirational, motivational sort of part of my challenge. And I was going to go out for a 1-to-1 training camp with her and swim over 6 days, swim about 60 kilometers, doing, you know, night swimming, 6-hour swims, 10-kilometer swims, you know, all of this in the open water. Again, you know, learning about tides, learning about currents, and swimming through waves and unfavourable conditions and things like that. And the big part of me looking at that was going, if I can do that, then I know with someone overlooking me that has done the swim around the Isle of Wight, then I'm going to know whether I'm on course for this or not. And I basically pinned everything onto this training camp. And then within a week, the pool started to shut down, the gym that I was using shut down, and then phone calls back and forth with Anna about, you know, flights in and out of Spain. And then before you knew it, the UK had locked their airport. So this training camp just disappeared. My swimming disappeared. And then I think, like a lot of people, I sort of saw the bigger picture and understood what was happening. And my first thought was, well, I don't want to be in Manchester. I want to be back on the island, because my dad is one of those that's at risk, and the reason why we're isolating and things like that because of his condition. So I was like, well, I want to be back home in case of anything, in case anything happens. So packed up from Manchester and went straight back to the island, and naively sort of thought, well, I'll be on the island, so I'll be able to sort of get in the water down there. And but went in, and this was at the end of March. Remember, I went in, the water was sort of less than 8 degrees. I'd been swimming like 3-4 hours, and I could barely sort of do 20 minutes before feeling too cold. So suddenly sort of felt this uselessness and this complete lack of control. And it took me about 2 or 3 weeks really to sort of realize that I'd lost motivation, and I'd sort of just got into this self sort of pity and this whole sort of like, it was already a near impossible challenge, and now it's getting further and further from me. This mountain in front of me is sort of disappearing into the horizon instead of doing the opposite, which was, getting closer to climbing it. So I think there was, even with the best running, it was a big challenge anyway. But so now this has really sort of knocked it, and now it is a little bit more of a reality of, okay, what is now achievable? Because I still want to do something this summer. I think that's important. I think the important thing for me is realizing that a lot of the charities at the moment are hit quite hard because, things like the London Marathon being cancelled and how much money that would, generate for these charities. So, although it's a difficult time at the moment for people to donate and to part with their own money, there's still the part of me that's like, I still want to raise awareness. And if I can even bring something in for the charities that I'm raising money for, then that's important. And the personal reason is that I told my dad that I was doing this, and the excitement in his face when I told him about it. I want to do something. I want him to see it. And the harsh reality is that if I was to postpone this until next summer, I don't think he would see it.
I think it's the most incredible challenge. How can people support you?
A number of ways. The main thing I'm asking from people is to share the story and to share, because like I said, I want people to talk about the condition that my dad's got. So I've got a website where I'm sort of writing blogs about a lot about the training, but also trying to link it to how my dad is. So I'm trying to mix up the two, because it's quite a heavy topic. I'll admit that. But again, trying to put a positive spin on things, and like I said, trying to get people aware. So the website is the trileofwight.com. So Isle of Wight with TR at the beginning. And then from that, you can probably find links to my social media as well. So I've got Twitter and Instagram under the Trisle of Wight, and there's a Facebook page as well. So people going on that, even people liking and sharing posts, has a huge impact on what we're doing.
Oh, well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll speak soon.
Yes, no, I'd like that. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for your time. It was really inspiring, and I love the message. I love that you're fundraising, but also doing something for yourself for a focus. So good luck, and I'm sure adrenaline will get you through.
Have a great day.
Tune in next week when I chat with a couple who 8 years ago went through a life-changing event. Their journey since has been incredible. They are passionate about inspiring people. They've almost always got a challenge on the go, and they created their own rehabilitation-based fitness company, and they show people every day that you're stronger than you think.